So following up, from some of the previous discussions, we were talking a little bit last time, pretty much sitting, with meditation, sitting with oneself, and, with that, beginning to learn to be kind of know who we are, feel who we are, become friends with ourselves, which is, pretty much being able to say that I can sit with whatever energy is coming about. And we can also recognize, that the, different types of discontent, suffering, pain that is within our mind. Because, as we said, the Buddha's first teaching was on the Four Noble Truths. Took place in Varanasi in India, in a place called Deer Park. And it's kind of interesting because when Buddha was in Bodh Gaya in India and meditating, sitting there for 6 years meditation, toward the end, many things came about, to try to distract him and take him away from, from his meditation. Sometimes it was like he was being attacked and things. Other times it was like, being, from lust from women, all these different things are coming. Those are what's called, the Sanskrit word for that is Mara. It's illusion, the illusions which are coming up. And so, actually for ourselves, we begin to see that we have different things that come up and try to distract us and, try to push us in different, in different directions, especially away from, in this case, the path of awakening. So, as I've said before, Buddha, was a historical figure 2,600 years ago, but what Buddha really means is awakened. So what we're trying to do is kind of like wake up. So with our, within our, meditation, when we're sitting there quiet with ourselves and we don't have the ability during that time to distract ourselves putting on another TV show or a radio show or even grabbing a book or whatever it might be, it's that learning to sit pretty much with oneself. And so the difficulty of sitting with oneself is that we've never done it. We haven't done that. This is not how we were brought up. Everything is outside of us. Everything is grasping, more or less outside of us. So this becomes a somewhat different approach that we can begin to sit with ourselves and sit with the kind of crazy energy, behavior, neurotic, thoughts and patterns that are within oneself, but be able to sit there without them taking control, not like the Mara was doing to Buddha. The different Maras were there attacking and things. So, we're able to begin to sit within that and see that it's very illusory in nature. Very, very illusory in nature. So, as I've said before, it's kind of difficult because, we think that, the way we're brought up in the West is that everything that's going on is in our physical brain. We need our physical brain. This human body, we rely upon this human body. But in the Eastern way of thinking, the mind is not the same. So what we are is, we have mind, we have body, and we have energy within us. So the energy flows within us. So we have energy relates very close to sound. So even when we were doing the Om Ahung mantra, the Om is more to do with purifying and opening up the physical body part. The Ah is for the speech or the energy level. The Hung is for the mind. So But it's very difficult. What is mind? We hear a teacher sit down and say, okay, sit and put your mind in its natural state. I don't even know what my mind is. What is it? What is this thing that's thinking? What's this conversation going on all the time? What's taking place? That's why Buddha had to sit there for 6 years in order to show the ability to discover, go into oneself and find out what we're completely made of. And when it's all said and done, he found that there's a really, really beautiful place within ourselves. There is a really beautiful place. There is a very peaceful place. But he actually said, I've discovered something, but I don't know how to express it, so I'm going to stay silent. This is the historical Buddha. He's going to stay silent because in order to express what is this taking place inside of me, what's really there, what's my real nature of myself, is hard to express. So when he finally did give teachings, which became requested by his students, because that's Buddhist way. Buddhist thing, is not one that goes out and says, oh, you got to listen to me or do this or that. They wait for requests for teachings. And so that's where in Varanasi, Deer Park, he gave the Four Noble Truths. And so why did he give the Four Noble Truths? Well, the Four Noble Truths, as we talked about last time with sitting and understanding pain and suffering, it's kind of interesting because, myself having lived in the Far East for many years and things, I see that it's easy to see the suffering, when you're in certain third world countries and you see people dying and being cremated right in front of you, and the walking, and you see people, thousands upon thousands of people, on the street, beggars. They've even got groups of them that are like being in the the Union. And they're all out there, and they've got many without arms and legs and leprosy. And you can see, so when it comes to pain or suffering, we know. But we, in the West, we hide from it. But what we have here is, we actually have more mental suffering. That's what it appears to me, more mental suffering. When I used to walk, from the one stupa area, which is one of the huge, beautiful things which represents the Buddha's mind within Kathmandu, walk up to the monastery to Kopan. I loved it, watching the little kids that were out, over there. All they had was, I always love telling this story, they had like a little wheel, like a wheel that would be on a bike or something, and then they had a stick, and the stick was kind of L-shaped, and they would just run, and balance that. And they were completely happy, satisfied with that. It wasn't like here where, okay, now it's, Christmas or a birthday, and I've got this gift. Oh, great, nice. Now what's in that one? And get this and get that. So, we live in a large supermarket, in a sense, with anything we want going. Here we are in a pretty cold city, yet we can cook any kind of food we want because we've got everything at the supermarkets. So basically, we've always got something we can do to kind of take care of ourselves, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to make ourselves, pretty much comfortable, and we're grasping after all these different things. If I have this dinner, if I have this food, if I have this car, that's what's going to make me happy. But as I said before, we understand the suffering of suffering, which is when our legs are hurting, when we got a broken arm, when we got a cold or flu. The second one of the sufferings, which is the suffering of change, which is when everything we think of as being pleasure will change into suffering in some kind. So even the food we get, we overeat it, and or we find somebody we like and then we get tired of them, and everything, all of those, why are they changeable? Because Buddha taught the other truth, which is impermanence. And so we're chasing after something by its nature cannot give us back what we deserve, that Buddha couldn't express, that true happiness that actually lies within oneself. And so we go along, and as long as we can keep on replacing, getting this, getting that, and doing this and doing that, and doing this and doing that, and don't explore, within ourselves, we don't see the real state of the truth of dissatisfactory nature of our grasping mind. And part of it is because we overestimate, we believe that these particular objects will be what makes me happy. They do make us happy, but we overestimate it. If we go about it with a proper attitude and understand them to be temporary and to just enjoy them and fully appreciate them, but we don't fully appreciate them. So Buddha taught that, and so of course then he also taught the third of the sufferings, which is what's called, as long as we're stuck within this prison, karmic prison that we've created for ourselves, we're always going to be dissatisfied. So the importance then of this, Buddha was very smart. He was a good psychologist. So he couldn't tell them right away about what real enlightenment was, or the real full awakening and things, but he is able to say, okay, your lives are somewhat painful, but he couldn't recognize it at first because his father, the king, was hiding him. Right? And so because he was hiding him inside the palace, and there was nothing, never seeing sickness, death, and old age, it was kept completely away from him, like we do in the West here, as I've said before, to some degree, not quite as good as this king was able to do, but because of that, once we understand that in our confused state, we're going to have dissatisfaction. And so he first taught the truth of suffering, the truth of discontent. But he said, there's a cause for that suffering. Right now we get hurt, we get sick. Most of the time something's wrong with us, and we take an aspirin. Well, the aspirin is masking the pain. It's not going toward the cause. So Buddha is very smart. He's not going to tell anybody about the cause of suffering until they understand they're really suffering. Just like if we're working with somebody who basically is cheating us, but we don't know it. They're stealing our happiness because little by little they're taking money away or whatever they're doing. If we don't recognize it, we're not going to do anything about it. So the psychology was that show the dissatisfactory state of mind that exists today in our existence, but then show that, wait a minute, there's hope, there's a cause for it. If there's no cause, then there's no solution. But because there's a cause for it. So Buddha taught the truth of suffering in order to, then show that what's the true cause of suffering. And then the third and fourth of the Noble Truths is the truth of the cessation of suffering, which is going beyond suffering. And then the path, that again, because you're not going to look for a path if you don't know there's a way out there. So what is the cause? What's the cause of all this that goes on within us? It's our emotions. They, like to translate sometimes some type of like conflicting emotions. So what does that mean, conflicting emotions? Because they're conflicting with our true nature of mind, they're conflicting. So what is it that's taking place? Well, our mind actually has the ability has clarity to know. It's clear in knowing. But when it grasps after certain things, it's like when we put on those yellow sunglasses and everything appears yellow. Stuff's not yellow, but it appears yellow. We put on some other sunglasses and it appears dark. Or we get jaundice and things appear yellow. Right now, we live within a matrix. We live within a spider web of a world we've created for ourselves that says, these are the objects that I like, and so it sees them. We don't really see them properly, correctly. Our mind is diluted. It's distorted. I always like to use that mirror, that mirror at the, when you go to the carnival. You look at yourself in the carnival and you're all stretched out. Okay? Mirrors generally can reflect properly. Our mind can reflect properly. But why we sit within meditation is because our mind and these diluted states of mind are not the same thing. It's just like it's just like up in this space, in the sky. If it's clear out, we see the sun clearly or we see the moon. But if there's clouds in the sky, it becomes distorted. So our mind is basically distorted in the way it's viewing our day-to-day life, our moment-to-moment life. So the idea of meditation, of sitting down and quieting down, is we begin to quiet down this process, which allows the possibility, opens up the possibility of the clear knowing mind to begin to see things and see things as they are and begin to enjoy all things rather than having divided up the world like we have. Because we've divided the world. We've divided it into the world that we want to avoid, into the world we want to grasp after, and then we have a little section sitting there that we haven't made up our mind about yet. That's the state of dullness, the mind of equanimity, but not the clear equanimity. It's a confused equanimity. So when we sit in meditation and we sit there, we then can start to understand that this awareness that goes on, that's aware of when we're moving our arm, that's aware of cars are driving by, this awareness is always there. It's always there. That's what we have is a stream of consciousness, of awareness that continuously flows and is able to see things properly. If you go down to the river and you look down at it, and if it's just moving slowly or very not moving at all, you can see the bottom. If it gets stirred up, it becomes distorted. When the mirror has dirt, film, dust on it, it doesn't reflect our what we look like properly. But we can wipe the mirror off, because the delusions, in Sanskrit the word is klesas, those delusions in our mind are not one. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it, that there is a process, and that these can be removed from that. So while we sit down and sit quietly in meditation, many times we're able to settle down most of the heavy grasping after things that we want, or aversion to other things that we don't want, and sit quietly. But when we sit there and get into a more subtle state, we can also begin to discover there's still some subtle grasping going on. Oh, I felt really good a second ago, but now what's going on? So I want to get back. I want to grasp back at that moment in the past again. we have to be able to go past time, go beyond, the past, the future. The present is just, it's fleeting. Anytime you're aware of the present, it's already gone. We cannot grasp at all these things. But because our mind is confused, we think we do. And so we create these patterns and we create the world. When you're young, or if you do something like you go to a country where you've never seen people like that before, you maybe don't know what attractive is. But after a while, your mind's got to take on a stance. So this is attractive, and that's what I'm going to grasp after. That's unattractive, and grasp after that. All of that is created by our dualistic, confused state of mind. All of that. That's not the reality. So when we have different situations that take place with ourselves, sometimes we wake up, or we, whatever it might be, all of a sudden things are kind of okay, but then all of a sudden it kind of feels like, oh, I don't feel so good. I'm in kind of a bad mood now. This doesn't feel, why am I in a bad mood? Bad mood maybe because all of a sudden you were at work and somebody else got promoted. And so the deluded part of the mind that basically, thinks, why did they get promoted? I should have been promoted, right? So because of that, because of being attached, to what I should have, not what they should have, and because of grasping, because of self-cherishing myself, I should be having that. So they're getting promoted, and so it throws me completely off. Okay, so this is what takes place with ourselves. So we find ourselves then getting into moods. We start to, when that takes place, we're already beginning to block ourselves. We're blocking up all of our energy from flowing properly. And that's where that's why we end up getting sick as well, because we've gone out of balance. Balance is always there, but we don't see it. So instead, we've got this matrix that's created out there, and so my energy is going to go toward grasping, for this. It's going to go toward rejecting that. And then when we sit in meditation and we find ourselves rejecting something, in our back or in our knees, in reality, it's only energy. It's just energy. But we've labeled it pain and don't like it and get rid of it. Okay? At some other time, I'll talk a little bit about there's many ways to be working with this energy. There's many different approaches, which, in Vajrayana, Tantrayana, the way that you can transform energy. And it was like one of the high lamas from Tibet that, besides the Dalai Lama, but the Karmapa, who is the head of the Kargyupa lamas, I read something of him saying something, we were born with bliss and we die with bliss. So that actually the nature, our real nature is bliss. But we don't know where to find that. We don't know how to find it. So that's why there's these approaches, how to begin to to deal with them. But as we sit right now, we've created this environment. Okay, why did we create this environment? What is there? So in the Buddhist thought, there's all these different emotions that take place, these conflicting emotions. The three main conflicting emotions, are ignorance, craving or grasping, and aversion. So what we spend our life on, for the most part, is avoiding what we feel as aversion, chasing after what we grasp after, and And the ignorance is is basically, I just don't know, about this situation or this person or whatever it might be. So, that in the, I don't know if any of you have seen, we talked about it just for a second, last time, about the wheel of life. So the wheel of life is depicting, the different chains of what's called dependent arising, because all things are dependently arisen, but we see them as existing non-dependent, all by themselves, permanently, and what they are. So I'm going to grasp after that, and I'm going to reject that. But where is the real culprit? Those are actually easier to see. Where is the real culprit? The real culprit is in ignorance. Ignorance is what's known as, it's ignoring our reality. But even worse than that, it's knowing it wrongly. So the first mistake that it makes, when the first mistake it makes, it pops up and says, this is who I am. This is me. If we begin to look at that, we'll begin to understand that we've created this feeling of ourselves, that this is who I am. No problem. So this, because this is me, who I am, then I have to get angry at something like this that happens. I have to get upset when when something like this happens. I have to, chase after something else here. Instead of understanding that there's no self-existing I, ego within, but we have to keep ourselves moving very fast because we don't want to really see what's going on. So we got to keep on moving. We've got a lot of things to do. So like when we're meditating, that's where we begin to slow this process down. It's a process of walking instead of taking an airplane. Now we start to see things. And actually we can begin to appreciate the world because we're not seeing the world through the filter of this is me. And this is my world. My world wants these things, doesn't want those things, because this is who I am. And I'm always going to be that way. So when we sit down and we're meditating and we begin to have thoughts, we begin to feel things in our knees and our back, hear sounds. There's a home, I don't know what's the word to use it. There's a reference point that's kind of like the home camp that everything has to report back to. Keeps reporting back. Oh, I just saw this. I don't like that. I just saw that. I do like that. I just heard this. I just felt this. All of that. And so we keep on imprinting that over and over and over again. And we create this, this artificial world. So you've heard the word samsara? Many times people say, oh, I'm going to samsara, I'm going down into the city or something. Samsara is within ourselves. Samsara is the Sanskrit word which really means we keep recycling our garbage. We keep recycling who we think we are without really seeing that it's not true. So the beauty in the meditation is when all of a sudden sometimes we drop that, even for a brief moment, even for a moment within that meditation, and we don't have that reference point, and we just are experiencing things, but there's not a grasping at this I, at this me, of who I am. We begin to feel infinite space, which is part of our real nature. We don't feel space now, we feel crowded You know, that's why we get all constricted, within our body. All of a sudden, everything can flow for just for a second. What takes place within a short moment of really letting go? And I always say the word letting go is difficult for me, because letting go still implies doing something. What it really means is it's more of an absence of doing.
Leave it be.
Let it be. But let it is still saying to do something. It's more of a negative. It's just an absence of doing. You're just not doing. You're not doing. So there's you sit there and you're not having to do anything, and you have complete openness, which is the true natures of our mind, which is very open and clear and beyond the conceptual mind. Right now we have trouble with this and with these concepts because they are concepts. But when we have the experience, that's an awakening. That changes us. Within a short moment, we are beyond time, so there are things we can know in a short moment that generally takes us a long, long time to know. Just very quickly, our mind has that ability to know. All of a sudden, everything lines up. You're able to see, understand, but there is no, it might be that you're just sitting there for 1 minute, but you can only see that relative to somebody else saying you're beyond these relative concepts. So when the teachers talk to us, when Lama Yeshe would tell us the most important thing is experience. And once we begin to start to experience it, then what usually takes me to tell you, okay, well, you've never tasted chocolate? Well, it tastes like this, it tastes like that, it tastes like this, but you still don't get what it tastes like until you taste it. Tasting the real nature of one's mind is like going home, because it's our real home. That's why we say sitting within our real nature, our true nature, because that's really what we are. So then we're able to really see it. Sometimes it's like seeing the face of the Buddha, because all of a sudden it becomes completely apparent at that time of experience it. And the feelings with it, just like when all of a sudden, we run into somebody that was a best friend of ours we haven't seen for whenever, or we run into our family, or we come back to home after being away. It's just a very nice, relaxing, natural place within. So this begins to take away the clouds. So the clouds of the karma that's created by the grasping at that, which might mean, I don't know, maybe it means I'm going to cheat somebody because I want to make more than they're making. And so once I do that, I create that action. Actions take place through our body, through our speech, through our mind. So when I feel that jealousy that comes out because somebody else here got promoted, or when I become attached that somebody says some nice things about me, praises me, or become aversion because somebody talks badly about me. All of those things create this karma. That karma is what leaves that habit formation and leaves us locked in. That's why we can't be, we can't be free. We can't be totally happy. It's like being put into prison, but we're put into one of those prisons where they let you have a room and a TV, That's nice. I mean, it's not that bad. It's kind of comfortable there. They got a gym to work out in, and even a hot tub or whatever. But if I wanted to go somewhere else to go on vacation, I can't go anywhere. I'm still in prison. While we're within samsara, we're within prison. We might find times and moments of freedom, but it's relative freedom. It's not the real freedom. So the thing that drove the Buddha to go look for more when he left that palace was this innate wisdom that's existing within all of us. We all have that. We all have that wisdom, and that wisdom that knows, somebody's trying to fool me here, telling me that that's going to make me happy. It can make us happy if we go about it with the proper mind. We just appreciate it. We get that food, and we actually taste it in the mouth. We chew it enough to taste it. We let it fill us with nutrition. We're slowing down enough, not worrying about getting the next bite in. Or we're walking to some place and we can take a step at a time. And we can begin to appreciate, the world, rather than grasping for what's next, and this is that, da 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 da. And so this is what moves us along in the path, and that's where it's saying that there's actually liberation. That's the truth of the cessation of our confused state. Actually, is there. It's there. It's been discovered by others. It can be discovered by us. Everything that takes place with us is changing all the time, But instead, we stay within this recycled environment. Okay, in that wheel of life, I was meaning to say before, in the very center of that wheel of life, it shows three things. It shows a pig, a snake, and a rooster. So the snake represents our aversion, our anger, our hatred. And the pig represents our ignorance, which is kind of like a pig can go down there and it's kind of closed-minded, and you could have a big cheeseburger sitting over here, but it doesn't go for it because it's got all this muck over here to, and so it's kind of just closed-minded, can't see much. And then the rooster is more or less to do with the, desire and the more or less grasping. So if we can begin to feel the grasping that's going on within ourselves, just become aware of it and let it start to dissolve because of our wisdom energy that exists within us. We're not hanging on to the Titanic anymore like nails, scratching at it. How relaxing. Maybe it's relaxing. Just let go and drop into the water. And maybe you don't drop into the water. I don't know. But the grasping, the continuous grasping which goes on, that's what creates the problem, within our mind, that grasping mind. So I think that's kind of enough for right now. We can leave it open if any discussion, any questions. Everything good?
I think we're good.
I just want to comment that I've been reflecting lately more of the concept of pain, not so much of something to try to avoid, but seeing it more as like a gift of awareness, because like that comes up for a reason, even just like on an evolutionary standpoint, like, say for instance, if I touch something that's hot, that pain there is sending me a signal, that it's danger. And so, so I'm looking at like suffering more as like a signal that something's not aligned or just like not,
No, you're hitting it exactly right. That's what happened when when Buddha escaped from the palace the one night and got out there, and he didn't know what sickness was and what old age was and what death was, and all of a sudden he's seeing it and saying, what is that? And it's basically, there's substance to it. There's a reality to it. So that's the truth of suffering. Okay, beginning to recognize, then you'll begin to look for what's causing that suffering. So that's where you go. You now begin to evolve from from suffering itself, from reckoning. Okay, I've got this thief in my house. who is it? How do I get them out? Do I have to put up a security system to see who's sneaking in when I leave for work or something, and I come back and something else is missing and that? But that's really exactly it. The hard thing is that if suffering was all we had, then there's a reason to try to avoid it.
Yeah, right.
But it's not all that we have, and that's why it's actually a good thing if you can begin to recognize it. You can begin to work with it, and then your innate wisdom energy begins to open up like a lotus flower in your heart begins to work with it somewhat. And the truth is that even what we were talking, where I was talking about the cause of it is the delusions, the emotions. In Buddhist practice, at the beginning, you try to become aware of yourself, and so because inside your mind you see that somebody does something or says something, and you see that you've gotten angry, and so are you going to lash out? Or are you going to have mindfulness and catch yourself maybe, to not keep this, process going? Okay, so what's the antidote in the beginning of the path for anger and hatred? Love. Having some love and kindness and understanding, for the other person. Sometimes very difficult to do. But as we move on in the path, when we move on within the path, we also begin to work with things a little bit differently. There can become the ability where we begin to have certain things like pain and different things happening and emotions, and we begin to say, I want to take that on for everybody else and give them happiness and kindness. So we transform that into a more open, loving, open, mind and awareness and attitude. Okay. And then there becomes within the tantric path, the Vajrayana path, where we actually begin to transform. So it's not, we don't put dirt under the carpet because we're going to have to come back and get that dirt out at some point. So we're not suppressing our emotions, but we're transforming them and they're becoming in their pure nature. So this is a whole thing of the tantric path and why there's different colors and why there's different deities, because there's ways of transforming energy. It becomes like alchemy, where you're able to, it's really more like magic. And then there also becomes the practices as you move along with Mahamudra and Dzogchen and others, where your mind's wisdom becomes so sharp, it can immediately release emotions without transforming them, without blocking them, but it has the ability to truly see through them. So then it's like driving down the road and seeing, the water that's in front of you, but your wisdom knows it's a mirage, and so it doesn't. It's a mirage. The sounds are echoes. So you begin to be able to use it. So all of these things that take place then become more or less fertilizer for opening up our wisdom. There are different wisdoms that open up. So the five delusions, which is, as I told you about the three, the main one that causes it, but the hardest to find, is that ignorance that continuously grasps at myself as a true stationary entity that everything has to report back to, and I'm always going to be that way, and that's always me. And we know that that's not true because we all change our views, our attitudes, but our view is a wrong view. So that wrong view creates a huge problem. That's the ignorance, the grasping after the things that wrong view says that's what I like and goes opposite of what I don't like, has jealousy toward others, has pride for, because of feeling I'm better than somebody else. And so all of those five have a pure version of themselves which is transformed into, in the Vajrayana path, the 5 wisdoms and the 5 dhyana Buddhas, which is too much to talk about right now. But just to give a little, a little bit of a GPS roadmap before we hit. Yeah, up there actually, the Dhyana Buddha's in the picture up there. So that's when all of that stuff becomes somewhat transformed. So anyway, I got off the point a bit there, but that's very good, that you're using that as a road mark for realizing, hey, not everything is just rosy here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess the other thing that's difficult too is like this human experience as far as like we run off of like our survival instinct, right? And so, and that's like what's kept us coming back. So this like, I guess the concept of like the will to live and survive versus like letting go. And I know that I had a near-death experience when I was 12 years old. I went to Mexico for the summer with my mom and my 2 siblings, older sister and younger brother. And then on our way back, we were flying over St. Louis, and we had a severe thunderstorm. The pilot tried to like maneuver the plane higher than the clouds. But all of a sudden, severe turbulence and
Dropped.
yeah, and so
I had that happen to me.
the plane
Yeah.
just did a nosedive.
No, that didn't
and-
happen to me. We dropped it. I never noticed
No,
that.
it was like did a
Yeah.
nosedive, and then things.
Yeah.
The overhead compartments were falling out. I saw like the faces of the flight attendants, and I saw the fear, and everything just kind of suspended as far as time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my mom, she's praying the Hail Mary. My sister, and everyone's screaming. And then for some reason, it just I looked at the door of the
Cockpit.
the cockpit, and I just realized like that was just completely out of my control. Like I just relinquished control over the situation, and I knew that it was out of my hands. Like I don't know how to fly a plane.
So that wisdom let go.
Right, and so I just remember feeling like secure and grounded in my chair with the
Seatbelt.
seatbelt on, and just like my feet feeling grounded, and this overwhelming sense of peace and serenity just overcame me.
Yeah.
And this was a time where the airlines, I remember it was American Airlines, they served dinner, and I turned over to my sister's plate or tray, and there's like a piece of chocolate cake that's just kind of like launched there. And it's just like kind of silly thought, but I thought, well, if this is the end, I might as well just like enjoy some cake. So I asked
Well, that can
her-
go either way. You could either enjoy it or not even think it doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, no,
So
that, yeah.
I went over to her, or looked over to her, and I said, "Are you going to have that?" And she's like, "Oh, how can you think about that right now?" But eventually, obviously, I survived. But I know in those moments, like, okay, there's no control, right? Relinquish control, but yet, how do we balance like surviving? Like, if someone
Yeah, so there's a mechanism within ourselves that that has natural survival without grasping.
Okay.
That exists within ourselves. Do we have it, or is it muddied like all the other things are? That's the real question. The ability to self-preserve, in the sense of not that I'm grasping at a self, that there's a real self inside of myself, but knowing that if I step here, I'm going to be down about 10,000 feet off of this mountain or something, for example, walking, okay? So we have, part of our intelligence and wisdom has survival instincts.
Right.
What's on top of that is what matters. Is there some, if we're basically walking on a very small road, up in the mountains or so, and we begin to really panic, okay, then there's a chance we might fall off because we're going to get dizzy, we're going to be worried and things. I always like to tell the story. When I was 7 years old or so, I was walking to school, and a train. I used to go across these train tracks to get to school, and all of a sudden, the train starts to come. The lights are going boom, 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 and I'm sitting there, and for an instant, I like froze. But luckily, you know, I had the awareness. No, well, listen, it doesn't matter if I go that way or that way. I just got to go one way or the other, not just stay here frozen, in a sense. So the state of mind, the level of our state of mind, that's what all things, and even like if you looked at martial arts today and different things, you know, you watch that movie The Matrix, where everything all of a sudden slows down, you can see it. We think things are the way that they are. We think they're that speed. They're not that speed. The way you see it, the way I see it, are different. Which one of us is right? Neither one of us are right. It's dependent upon our state of mind. So when we deal with things, even when we're sitting there and we're, you know, getting ready to take a test and we're all panicky and things, all of a sudden we're able to relax for a moment and just get into the quiet state of mind. We can begin to remember, be able to do something. Just it's like a reset in a sense, because you got out of this bad energy, you know, and things. So you know, what took place within you was a good awareness. And I tell the story, as even in one of the other tapes and things there too, when I went to San Francisco, you know, years ago, I had a van, and I had all my stuff inside that van, and it got stolen. And the relief I felt when that stuff was stolen, it was like a weight off my back, always worrying about, you know, I got my bikes in there, my stereos inside there, I got all this, you know, everything there. It was like, it's only stuff.
Right.
You know, all of a sudden, you can put life into perspective. That's what I'm talking about. We have to put things in perspective. We're not putting them in perspective. And so, you know, because I'm grasping after this and trying to avert that, we're not seeing the situation. It's being distorted, and we're dealing with it wrong. So
And this causes suffering.
that is suffering. Yeah, exactly. It causes suffering, and it is suffering. So you're suffering, and you're causing more suffering because you've just redid. You just reamped again. This is
Me, wanted.
yeah. So there it is. There's the
Keeping,
yeah. So when we meditate, we begin to create some space and some gaps between that process. And all of a sudden, we get to look out a little bit. You know, oh, you can see the open space of it and things. So as I said, what usually happens here is we want to grasp at that again because the next minute we're thinking about it. But that's what the path is. The path is basically by working with what's called Dharma wisdom, we can begin to work with every situation is workable. Every situation is workable. That's the beauty. We live in the thing where we get pessimistic, and that's why we become depressed and things, because we just think, oh my God, well, just by nature, it's gonna dissolve itself anyway because of time, but it might go on for days or weeks. But every situation is workable. Everything. So.
Can you do dedication on the camera?
On the camera, sure. Okay. So in the within the practices, what's felt to be important is that when we start our practices, we start them with the right attitude, with the right motivation. So the motivation to kind of help and relieve, pain and suffering in the world, and for us to reach enlightenment in order to be able to do this. And then we do the action of the meditation or the talks. And so now we'll kind of dedicate this energy that kind of closes it, because like I always say, what we usually do is we think, okay, I'm gonna hurt that person, and then I hurt him, and then afterwards I say, I feel great that I did that. So we've kind of sealed that negative karma.
What kind of thing?
Okay, this is what we do on the positive. Now we're going to do this to be helping, to be, to reach a goal of enlightenment, and do the activities themselves, and then dedicate that energy at the end so that it doesn't get lost, directed to that. So,
Don't get attached to it.
Yes. So think for the benefit of all living beings, whatever positive awareness, wisdom that has been awakened within our meditation today and our talk, may that go toward happiness and peace within the world, of reducing the suffering, the wars, the hatred, the bad feelings going around. And may I myself become the one to make them free from this by developing the awakened wisdom within oneself, within myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.